Hi there, I'm Tyler,
And I'm Daniel.
and this is a true podcast. We're going to be recapping Fargo Season 4, Episode 1 and 2 today. How's it going tonight?
It's going pretty good because we got Fargo back.
It's been 3 years, and I've done nothing for the last 3 years, besides wait for the next Fargo to come out. We'll just start off with our overall thoughts on the episode. We know there's 2 episodes, so we're going to start with the first and then break down the second. I guess overall thoughts on the night, if you would like to go first.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the reasons that I really wanted to talk on a podcast, because we would talk just by ourselves about Fargo we've been doing it for the last 3 years. We've been talking about seasons 1, 2, and 3 for 3 years now. But the reason I thought it would be fun to do it on a podcast was just because I feel like that there's not really much event viewing anymore. And so my overall impression of the night is just that it's fun to have an event viewing television show again. I never watched Game of Thrones. I know that's a sin, but that was obviously the biggest event television show to be watching, and now that's gone. And it's kind of obnoxious to say that, we're binging everything, man, sort of a mentality. And there's good things about binging, and I tend to binge comedies and things like that. But with a show like Fargo that's so deep and nuanced and demands a lot of the audience, it's nice to be able to watch it one episode, or in this case 2 episodes at a time, and then talk with your friends about it over the course of the week and theorize and put things together. And that's also one of the great things about crime stories. You're watching it develop and unfold, and then you get to try to put those puzzle pieces together. And so I think the nature of Fargo itself sort of lends itself to event viewing more so than a lot of other shows do. It was just really exciting to put those puzzle pieces together again. And like you mentioned, it's been 3 years since the 3rd season, which we both really liked. I think I liked it a little bit more than you did. It was really nice to get back into the world of Fargo, even though the world of Fargo now in season 4 looks kind of different.
Yeah, definitely the first, just in general, I feel like the first 3 seasons are going to be like a chapter of Fargo within itself. And if it keeps going after season 4, I definitely think it might sway more towards this season in the future. Something I've really just enjoyed about Fargo in general tonight is that it is very ambitious of a season. I feel like one of the reasons I don't particularly love season 3 as much as 1 and 2, I still love it a lot, is that I think it kind of hit the end of all of the Fargo normality type things, like you got your good cop, you got your devil spawn, which we'll talk about later. I have a lot of thoughts on a character in season 4. But again, I think I would have been fine with never seeing a season 4, but now after watching episodes 401 and 402, I definitely think that there is a lot more Fargo can add, and especially the last 2 seasons, I think, have really shown that Noah Hawley is not ignoring the times that are happening in this world, and I really appreciate that he takes his time, and again, we'll get into 401.
Yeah, that's for sure. It's more so than any of the other seasons, because one thing that I guess I would want to bring up now is just that Noah Hawley was, asked, why are you setting this in Kansas City? Why did you decide to leave Minnesota and the Great White North? And his response was really interesting, actually. And it got me thinking about, what is Fargo and, what is the idea of what a Fargo story is. His response was basically Fargo is not a place. It's a type of crime story. And these crime stories happen all across America. So a Fargo story doesn't have to be set in Fargo or in, Minnesota. It can be in Kansas City. And we've already obviously got ties to Kansas City through season 2 and in a little bit in season 1. Setting it in Kansas City, it broadens the world and it makes it into sort of like you said, I think you put it very well. The first 3 seasons are sort of like a chapter or, a part of one thing. And then season 4 is another thing. Still full of Fargo-esque hallmarks, but definitely taking the show in a new direction, and especially given the political climate, around, Black Lives Matter and all of the stuff that's been going on in that respect, the season is definitely more so than seasons 1 and 2, commenting a lot more on the world.
Yeah, which is really actually impressive because this was in production long before the more recent Black Lives Matter protest.
Right.
But also, I think something that clearly shows this, and I definitely think the editors did this deliberately, the intro is different in the first episode than usually in Fargo. Usually it just does this is a true story, run the tape type stuff. But it started with Fargo. Again, I think this is a hint towards the future of the series. The lettering was filled with the backdrop of a city, growing out the Fargo universe, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I guess we'll start the recap now, technically. The first 20 minutes is a history lesson by Ethelreda, which she's probably the youngest main character in Fargo we've had. She's 16.
Mm-hmm.
For Daniel, what are your thoughts on Ethelreda and the history lesson at the beginning of the first episode?
Yeah. Well, the thing with Fargo is that it's now all 4 seasons and the movie are just littered with characters that just pop out of the screen at you as soon as they show up. As the series goes along and develops, they're just rich characters, and from the very beginning, you can tell that they're lived in and well thought out, and they have a life behind them. And I think that's the case with Ethelreda. She immediately starts to quote, Frederick Douglass, and later in the episode, or in episode 402, she is speaking French, and she's clearly just this absolute genius. Immediately pops off the screen for me. And the whole episode, I was like, this is interesting that they're framing it through her when Chris Rock's obviously going to be the main character. And then as the episode goes along, you kind of realize, like, well, no, Ethelreda actually kind of is, possibly going to be the protagonist of the series, like in a lot of ways.
Yes, especially with her narration too. She seems very much, again, in the first 20 minutes, she is literally narrating the whole story of Fargo so far this season.
Right. Even if she's not the character that's putting things into motion, which is, what the protagonist is, she's still at least the one who's telling the story of this season, which I think is particularly interesting. And that first, 20 minutes, it's combining this history paper that she's doing and talking about the aspects of truth and lies, as all of the other seasons do, and who writes history and who gets to be a part of history. And that's all being interspliced with this really cool son and son trading situation between, at first, the Hebrews and the Irish, and then the Irish and the Italians, and then the Italians and the black crew, all the crime syndicates. This is have you ever seen that before?
You see like things similarly. I think it was shot more or less akin to a Wes Anderson movie. It was very symmetrical, very pleasing to the eye. Again, I haven't seen crime syndicates deliberately almost fashioned like a dance crew at some points in this episode. Like they're all like stomping their feet and they're like getting ready to like basically for a dance. Like their sons are gonna like twirl around and switch places. And again, like I thought this was a very great way to open the season, and I think it also touches somewhat on the cyclical nature of violence in a lot of media, and just in general, like I think it's definitely playing on mob movies throughout these first few episodes. But yeah, the nature of violence in it, as like one of my, we have aw heck moments, like very Fargo-esque moments. An aw heck moment is basically like an AC crushing someone's head or something like that in season 3.
Right, something that is quintessentially Fargo.
And I definitely think in this opening montage it shows that with the children of the. Okay, so this is where it gets confusing, but the children of the new crew betraying the old crew in some way, the old crime syndicate, and then coming up. And I think I put in my notes, my all heck moment is kid kill kid in this first episode when a younger Rabbi Milligan, right? Was it Rabbi Milligan?
Yeah, that's right.
kills the child of the other crime syndicate. And again, it's just like, as it goes on too, he ends up betraying his own family, which are the Irish. And I just think that's an interesting. It reminded me a lot of the ending of Macbeth. Like the ending of Macbeth is very like, violence is always going to happen. Like there's, even though Macbeth's dead, there's going to be like a new king that is going to slaughter people also, type thing. And I think this very much plays on that. And I'm interested to see where this season goes. And I have a lot of ideas about like where the crime syndicates are going to go in general. But I'll just say this now, like I don't think like the Fadas or which is a great name, or the Cannons are going to overtake one another. I don't think there's going to be a betrayal there.
It's in a lot of ways kind of, you described it as sort of like Wes Andersonian, and it's like a dance crew moment. It's super presentational, like if not totally believable in terms of like what crime syndicates would do. It's just so cool. It's like such a good way of visually demonstrating like what these crews are about. In terms of the Ben Winshaw character, the Rabbi Milligan character, who also just, talk about layers to your character. I mean, he starts off as one of the Hebrew kids, if I have that correctly, and then he's traded to the Irish, and then he's traded and then moves along into the Italians. So he's got like these three different like levels to him.
And great accent throughout, just a strange... again, I think he's a perfect Fargo character.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, he... and he... Again, this is from 402, but he describes his mentality as like dog eat dog. And you can see that this is like a guy who's really just... I mean, he's a Fargo guy. Like, he's going to do whatever it takes, and he's definitely... In a lot of ways, he's kind of the Hansi of this season. I can see that happening. He's a part of this family, but he's not really, and he never was. And I feel like that there's going to be a lot of moments. Again, we'll get into predictions later, but there's going to be a lot of good stuff to come out of that character. But yeah, that's the first. I think it was like 24 minutes before we get to the Fargo credit.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier it takes its time, and that's for darn sure, because most of Fargo, and again talking about like what makes a Fargo show, what it was to me before this episode or these two episodes was it's always a botched thing, like something goes wrong, and that's usually the jumping off point at the end of the first episode, where everybody's then interconnected because of this botched, whether it be robbery or whatever. This episode, though, they really, it feels like that moment might come later in the season. Like they started earlier than they normally would, if that makes sense. Like it's not quite the same Fargo structure as it has been. Instead, it's still, these interconnected stories coming together, which is, I guess, what really makes Fargo Fargo. But it's not like a botched robbery or a botched murder. Just things happen.
Right. And I think a lot of this season is playing on history. I think, again, last season was all about story, and it's like who tells your story. And in this, it's a lot about history and who tells. Again, there's a quote where the victors, tell history. That classic quote that I horribly got wrong right now. But like you said, Noah Hawley took 24 minutes to tell that history at the beginning, which I found very fascinating. But yeah, and then after the title, there's also, again, it's all interconnected, and there's a nice little moment with Loy and Ethel's parents hinting at something with them, which we'll get to later in the episode. But yeah, and then after that, Loy and the Fadas meet together, and they have a bloody handshake, which I thought was kind of interesting, instead of the old spit handshake. I think it just shows Loy, especially with all the credit card stuff too, is a man that is looking to the future. He even says it. He's like a futurist, Right. Yeah. No, and I guess we should do this now, because the casting of Fargo has always been really important.
And the casting of Chris Rock as, what is possibly the main character of this season, at least, the first build character of the season, was kind of, surprising, especially to me. But I think to most people it was pretty surprising because Chris Rock does not have a really long history of serious dramatic acting. He's doing it a lot more now. He's in I wouldn't call it serious dramatic acting, but he's going to be in the new Saw Spiral, like, spinoff thing. But so he's
serious.
No, so he's trying to, do more of that. And in that first scene where he shows up and then they ask him, "Are you alone?" And then he whistles and then the whole crew comes out. It's like movie star moment, And I think there's another movie star moment where he's in the bar or whatever that space is, and he's talking with, I think it was Dr. Senator, which great name, great character. We'll talk about him shortly. But they're talking about, are you sure you want to give up your son? Like, are you sure that this is the right move? And then Chris Rock, takes a swig and then turns around and the camera follows him as he's about to then give away his son, and the drums start kicking in. And again, it's just like, okay, they knew that they could get something really cool out of Chris Rock this season. He's just got that, enigmatic presence that's super. It just pops off the screen. So far through the first 2 episodes, I'm liking what I'm seeing. What are you seeing out of Chris Rock so far?
Yeah, I definitely like Lloyd Cannon a lot. I think something that Chris Rock has always had, and it's because he's a stand-up comedian, and like that comes very naturally to stand-ups, but he has so much charisma up there. Like, again, I saw his film Top 5 a while ago, and well, again, I don't think he's the best actor by any means. I think he just has that charm to him that really, especially in a show like Fargo, it really adds to it.
Yeah, and there's another moment where he comes home from his wife says, your daddy's had a long day, and then he talks with her for a moment, and then he goes to talk with the kids, and it's just like the shot is focused on his wife, but you could hear Chris Rock, Lloyd Cannon, saying, like, talking to the kids. The kids are like, "Dinner's ready and we helped make it." And then he's like, "Oh, well, if you helped make it, then I'm really excited about it." It's just like a cute little moment with the kids. And he doesn't have to do all that much, I don't think. So far, he's not being asked to cry on demand. All he's got to do is look slick, and he looks slick so far.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that the emotional depth will come in later in the season, and we'll probably be very wowed because Noah Hawley saw something in him that, he felt comfortable making him the main character of the season.
And just to touch on that, the costumes this season are pretty unbelievable.
Yeah.
The next scene would be the park scene where Donatello and Loy are talking, and again, that like playground set is like beautiful. There's like a nice shot of people like going up and down on a seesaw. But again, the tensions rise there between the Fadas and the Cannons, and I think that's also our first introduction mostly to Josto.
Yeah, Josto. Yeah, it depends on how much Italian flair you want to give it. Yeah, and very quickly, I think that there are a few characterization things that I would have liked to have cleaned up a little bit with the Schwartzman character in this first episode, but immediately he's confrontational is a fair way to describe it with the Cannon crew, and so immediately setting up that this is not going to be I think you get the impression early on in the episode that Papa is not going to be around for much longer, and that Schwartzman's probably going to be the guy to take over the crew. And eventually, once that does happen, we know that we're in for a whole lot of trouble with Schwartzman because he's a little off the rails.
Right. And again, this brings me to the next scene, is the giant fart scene with Donatella.
Yeah, which is my heck moment of the episode. Yeah. There's really nothing more Fargo in this episode, I think, than that moment. It's because you get a great like traffic stop moment where it's very tense, and the Italians think that they're going to be set up because this is a very common. Again, they're kind of playing off of gangster movies and other things that in media.
And
This is a common thing.
Ethel says this early on, but she said, "Peace don't last for long."
Right. Yeah. And so in this like traffic stop scene, which is really common, you get a car in front of somebody in a car and a car behind them, they're stuck, and then the guns start firing. And so the Italians, they think that they're in trouble. And then the music is so good through all 4 seasons, and it still is great in this 4th season. But the music is very intense. The performances are very intense, and then all of a sudden, the music fades away, and then Pop starts choking on what I assume is like a pistachio that he was eating in the park scene, and you think, okay, this is a very classic Fargo moment, like he's gonna die choking to death, and then you get a little twist. He survives the choking, he's okay, and instead he farts really absurdly and very loudly. I couldn't believe the length of the fart. And I'm surprised that we're talking about farts when we're talking about Fargo season 4. But it was a long fart, and then Schwartzman lowers the window and the tension's released, and then the kids who were outside shooting like the pellet guns accidentally fire a pellet into his neck.
Yeah.
And that's what ends up killing him. So it's like a whole bunch of Fargo all in one.
Which technically actually doesn't kill him, which
Right.
is also kind of another twist we'll talk about later in the episode, but which is also take a drink every time we say later in this episode. But no, it's such a fun little twist because Noah Hawley, he wrote and directed this episode. He gives you like every hint that it's going to be something in this scene. It's like people he thinks are a part of the cannon crew crossing the street. Maybe it's the crossing guard. Maybe it's a car like being backed up near them. But then they keep showing the kids' guns, and it's like this beautiful thing where it's like,
Yeah,
again, you only see the Italian crew's guns and the children's guns, but you never see the people they suspect have guns because, again, they're just reaching for cigarettes or something. But again, they keep going back to those kids, which is really funny. And I was like, this is just building up tension easily. But again, it's that old Hitchcock thing. It's like, put a bomb under the table and then you show it. It's like he was showing the pellet guns the entire time, and I just really like that. And
yeah, it's a really great moment. That's a good call for sure. And then he gets rushed to the hospital. And then we get what is a pretty important scene, because at first, they rush him to the hospital, and then they won't let him into the hospital because it's a private hospital, and it gives Schwartzman a great opportunity to be really, really upset. At some, I think at the end of episode 401, we'll talk about Schwartzman a little bit, because I have a lot more thoughts on Schwartzman just in general, but that scene ends up becoming sort of consequential for stuff that happens in 402. But so they get to the hospital, they're turned away because they're Italian and because they're criminals and because this is a fine, upstanding establishment, and then they're sent to Bartholomew, which happens to be also the place where Miss Mayflower, that's right, that's where she works. Orietta Mayflower, that's right. And we've met her at this point, right? In the funeral home scene?
Yeah, she's briefly at the beginning with Ethel. She's in that kind of montage of the first 24 minutes that introduces most of them.
Yeah, and characters. I mean, we'll talk about that in a moment once we get there. Take a shot.
Take a shot. But yeah, no, I also thought this was interesting because it was these hospital scenes were lined up with the bank scenes with Lou and Dr. Senator, which again just shows the plight of the Italian man and the black man in the 50s, and I thought it was really it's going to be a really interesting season seeing those two syndicates go at each other, because they're also they're not only fighting each other, they're also fighting against society, which is pretty interesting. And also at the hospital, Orietta and Josta have a little party, a little Coke party.
Yeah, a little Coke party. Yeah.
Which,
yeah, they.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say I think they're gonna have a lot. Have a they're gonna be like a kind of a duo in the season. I think in some ways. In the preview for episode 3, there was something with both of them, but I think they actually have like a lot of chemistry too, just like comedic chemistry together. And yeah, that little Coke party was very fun. And just the fact that she's like giving them eye drops and stuff to be like no one can know, it's like she's again hinting at that she's like hiding a lot of things from this hospital, which again a nurse should not do, it would seem.
I would 100% agree. No, yeah, I was just gonna say, and she mentions that she's from Minnesota. Obviously, the accent gives it away. Just I thought it was just odd that they were like, we have to have a Minnesota character in here.
She almost like makes you feel at home, like when you're watching this season, because like everything's so new, but it's like, oh, we got our Minnesotan, but again, she's a lot different than Peggy, and she's a lot different than Gus Grimley, and Gloria, definitely. But again, she definitely captures the vibe really well, and I honestly I think the standout performance, for me, is Jessie Buckley in this.
Yeah, totally. I think she's had a great couple of years just as an actress. She was also just in the new Charlie Kaufman movie, which is quite talked about right now. And now she's in Fargo. She's certainly going to be sort of an X Factor character, and that's going to be something that I'll ask you at the end of 401 is just some of the X Factor characters that we've been able to identify. Definitely. But she for me definitely gives the strongest performance. It's just the most convincing and the most seemingly authentic.
Yeah,
performance.
Very sincere.
Yeah, because Schwartzman is really playing up the comedy a lot, and Chris Rock hasn't had that much to do yet with Loy Cannon, and so that really sort of just leaves Buckley and the actress who plays Ethel Rita as well, who I think is probably going to be a star after this series is over, because there's going to be a lot for her.
Definitely. And I also just want to touch on, at the end of this scene, it cuts from Josto, Jason Schwartzman, smoking, and I thought it was just a gorgeous shot that they composed there.
Yeah, it was a long shot.
And like just went into Ethel having dinner, which is like it was very like nuclear family in some way. It was I feel like it was definitely playing on that, like it was the father, mother, and daughter just like happily eating in their 1950s kitchen, post World War II, and I just thought that was pretty interesting, and I know I'm interested to see where Ethel's parents go. Because the father reminded me a lot of Charlie Gerhardt from season 2 for some reason. Just he I think he had like a slight Minnesotan accent or something, but again, just thought that was interesting.
Let's talk about the father, because the performance there is really interesting. I'm actually super interested. Like, it's not a particularly interesting character yet. I'm sure that they'll dive into it, because there is a tremendous amount of interesting material there in that 1950s interracial relationship, and so I'm sure we'll dig into that more as the season goes along. But yeah, just the little performance quirks are very odd. Like I can't quite get a grip on if he's like maybe has like in like a sort of subtle way, like maybe he's clinically depressed but doesn't know it, and just like there's something that's just sort of off. He's a little slower on some of his responses. He's not really good at lying to his daughter. The performance just made me ask a lot of questions, and I'm kind of I just want to see more. I just want to see more of this guy.
That's a fun part about Fargo. It's like, which characters are actually going to be like main characters and actually going to have like an arc this season, and which like are just going to be kind of fun filler characters. And I definitely think the father has like a 50-50 chance either way.
Well, as you know, before the very end of 402, there's a moment where I'm thinking, okay, we're not going to be able to get much more out of this guy, but we'll get there when we get there.
We'll get there when we get there. And take a drink if you wish. But yeah, and I think we talked about the Loy going to his house a bit, which is a very sweet scene.
Oh wait, let me just jump back real quick. I do have a question for you because we brushed over the scene where he goes and talks to the bank. He invents credit cards. Chris Rock invented credit cards.
Right, yeah.
Right. Yeah. That was I was watching and I was like, okay, all right.
Or was it Dr. Senator?
Here we go. This is interesting because I mean there are so many. I mean, obviously this is a fictionalized thing, but there are so many inventions throughout history that have been, created by people who are not white, and then it's been completely taken by white people. So I just think it's an interesting sort of, if not overtly paying homage to that opening monologue about like who writes history and who's a part of history and stuff. It's at least sort of subtly hinting at the idea that like these ideas existed outside of just white America as well, and the fact that they're getting pushback on it is really interesting as well. But that brings me to my question, because I have a series of questions, and one of them is, at that moment, not knowing what you know now about credit cards, but if you were that banker, would you take his credit card idea?
Well, because the thing is, like, it's so easy to be like, of course I would take the credit card idea because credit cards are here to stay. But the reality of the situation is, with ideas like that, at times like that, it's most of the time, it's a 50-50 shot. It's like the dad, it's 50-50. And honestly, I probably wouldn't, because, again, if I'm a banker at that point, and also I thought the last line in that scene, one of the last lines was really funny when he was just like, the banks are like a fine, upstanding, like a company, and there's no way we would like want to take money from people like unnecessarily. And it's like, I feel like that's what banks do in general now. It's like they're just horrible. Again, a little on the nose, but I don't think I would take it in the 1950s because it's just such like a revolutionary idea. And again, I don't think I would take it, but I will give the question right back to you, Dan. Would you approve of a credit card in 1950 if you were Mr. Wickle?
Yeah, because that's the thing, is if I'm that guy, then I'm a racist, and I'm probably not going to take any business from any black person at all. But I felt like Chris Rock did a pretty good job. I thought he was pretty convincing, and Dr. Senator is a very reputable individual as well, a PhD, I think that they said he had.
In economics.
Right, from Howard. A lot of name checking for Howard in the last like 5 or so years. There, a lot of Howard T-shirts showing up in media, I mean, obviously, if I was that guy, no, I wouldn't take it because that sounds crazy. And also, like, if you're I understand his position a little bit also, because if you're the bank, you already you have everything you need. Like, why do you need anything from these guys? They need more from you than you need from them. But yeah, it's funny to think that Chris Rock as Lloyd Cannon invented credit cards in Fargo season 4 in 1950.
Yeah, like, again, it's just really funny to think that, like, in the universe that Ewan McGregor like lives in, like Chris Rock invented credit cards. Because again, I think they definitely. I was thinking about this. Like, I'm like, do they use credit cards in like Fargo? Have we ever seen a credit card in Fargo? Which is such a stupid question, but something I've been thinking about since this episode came out. But yeah, it's just so strange to think that in a world with 2 Ewan McGregors.
And a Lorne Malvo.
And a Lorne Malvo, who is the spawn of Satan himself. Chris Rock invented credit cards.
And it wouldn't be the first time that somebody invented or at least thought up something that was revolutionary, because in season 2, in the last episode, Patrick Wilson's wife as played by Kristen Milioti, dreams up basically a Costco.
Right.
She's like, in the future, there's going to be one store where you could get everything, and it's amazing. Yeah. There's a lot of prophesizing going on by a lot of characters. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that scene because I thought it was absolutely remarkable.
Yeah, no, I love that scene, and I definitely had it in my notes, but I kind of just went over it. But yeah, thanks for bringing that up. And then I guess the biggest moment in the episode is when Nurse Mayflower, which again, interesting name, like coming in on the Mayflower and like, you know, bringing diseases. And also there's like motifs with Native Americans and like Indians throughout the series too, which is pretty interesting with that Mayflower comparison too. But she kills Donatello.
Right.
Like pretty viciously, I want to say, in a lot of regards.
Yeah, it was odd to me at the moment. I think they are able to get away with it because they explain it away later a little bit more, and they'll definitely go into it further and further along in the series. But when Schwartzman asks her, like, without asking her specifically, basically says, like, will you kill my father? And she's like, oh, yeah, no, I'll do that. Like, they don't know each other. And I thought that was just so odd that she would just jump to that immediately. And then we get to see the actual scene where she does it. And it's pretty sadistic and very weird and super twisted and based in religion. And it's odd. And so in that moment, you're like, oh, okay, I can kind of buy that that Schwartzman just got lucky and he has a psycho nurse that's, you know, insane.
Mm-hmm. And it seems like they do know each other beforehand, just because again, when they meet in the hospital seemingly for the first time, it's like it's kind of clear that like he's like, you do coke, clearly. So I don't know, it'll be interesting to see them. And I think the most interesting part in that scene, besides the death, is she takes the ring off of Donatello's finger.
Can you describe that in detail, exactly how she does that?
It sounds like this. I just gotta say, in these times of COVID, I think probably the most horrifying part was when she put her lips around his finger.
I'm so glad you said that because I've been watching a lot of movies made obviously before COVID, and there's scenes where characters will like share a cup of soda or something, or they'll do what she did in this episode. And I'm thinking like, oh God, yeah, I just cringe a little bit. Just come like, you might get the vid, you know?
And I guess again, leading into the final scene is she goes home. She lives across the street from Ethel, and she's muttering to herself throughout. And Ethel like hears her and is like, "Oh, that's kind of weird." And she goes up into her little apartment, and the camera pans up, and she's murmuring to herself outside the window. And that's where season 4, episode 1 leaves us. Yeah, definitely a slow episode, but I definitely enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was a really good episode of television. It was a form breaking episode of television for Fargo for sure. And that ending is, I mean, especially with the music as well, because there's through episode 402 as well, but in 401, the music change for Mayflower's scenes is pretty dark and pretty intense. Like it's a very horror film-esque inspired sort of music, and when she is staring through her window across the street, I'm like, oh, okay, we're doing a horror season. Like this is pretty intense.
Yeah, I think in my notes I said, who put Ryan Murphy in as cinematographer here?
Yeah.
Just because again she's very similar, again, not to Nurse Ratched in the original One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, but Sarah Paulson's in the new Netflix series, just based off the trailer. At some points, it seems very over the top, Which is funny because we talked about this earlier, but she's very sincere with her performance. Besides these random bouts of horror, I want to say, and I feel like there's like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde thing going on with her in some regards, and we'll get into this in predictions, but I definitely do think she might be possessed by the devil. That is my bold prediction for this season, and I think there's a lot of more hints towards that in the second episode, and we'll get into that. But I think that's gonna be the mythic part of this season, because they've been hinting at religion a lot throughout the first 2 episodes.
Yeah, I think just overall, like as an episode, also it doesn't show its cards too soon. It doesn't really show many cards at all. All you really get in terms of information out of the first episode, obviously you learn about all these characters, but like in terms of information that you're getting, it's like, okay, we have 2 groups, the Italians and the Cannons, and or the Fadas and the Cannons, and then this family that's kind of caught in like this loan brokering thing, and a creepy nurse that lives across the street. Like, we don't really get all that much. I mean, it's just it's very character centric, which is nice. It's not so plot heavy in the first episode, and there is quite a bit of plot to chew on as well. And it's nice and tasty, nice and good, and I enjoy it.
Yeah, I would say one of the most shocking parts of the first episode is that there's no detective character yet introduced, which again is like a point. Huge, at this point it's a trope, kind of like it's a huge Fargo trope in a lot of ways, and like every season you can point at that is the pure good guy cop or good woman cop or good person cop, but I think a part of me felt like that was missing in this episode, and something to keep it grounded in some ways. But again, I think when you're changing something up, I think that's completely okay.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, I mean, the introduction of the police officer type character in the first 3 seasons and in the movie is because there is that botched, whatever that ends up with the murder of somebody, and so somebody has to investigate something, but there's nothing to investigate. The whole episode I was kind of waiting. I was like, oh, okay, something's going to happen here with one of the families, and then a detective's going to get involved somehow, but then it just it never happens. And then even through most of 402, there's not much in the way of like detective work going on. And I don't think we're going to get a ton of detective work in the same way that we've gotten in the previous seasons, which is really interesting. It's, it's just more about these 2 families, basically. Okay, before we go on to 402, I do just want to mention something that's extremely important to both you and I, Tyler, and that's a line in the scene with Schwartzman and Buckley where they're having a little Coke party, and Schwartzman, he delivers there's a little reprise of one of our favorite lines from season 1. Do you want to tell the folks at home what that is?
I mean, it's a classic Lorne Malvo line when he's disguised as the dentist. He just goes, "Aces," all the time.
That's right. And Schwartzman says "aces" in this Coke party scene, and it just brought a smile to my face. That's all.
And again, it's the beauty of Fargo. It's like those little moments are the equivalent of like a normal callback in a normal show.
Right. Yeah, we get as excited about this one stupid word just because it references something hilarious in season 1. as we would in like Game of Thrones when like somebody shows up from the dead with a sword of magic. I didn't watch Game of Thrones, but you get my point.
But yeah, let's start talking about 402. I realize we don't have the titles for them, so we can say them real fast.
Yeah, so 401 was Welcome to the Alternate Economy, and then 402 is the Land of Taking and Killing, which is referenced later in one of the better lines from one of my favorite new characters. And guess what? We'll get there.
Bottoms up. So yeah, season 4, episode 2 opens with something that kind of looks like the prison from Scooby-Doo 2, Monsters Unleashed. What a callback. But again, it's like it's very Azkaban, very Alcatraz, very in the middle of nowhere, some very Shawshank. People are crawling through the sewers. And again, Noah Hawley loves his classical movie references, and I definitely think this was in reference in some regards to Shawshank. Just like an odd couple vibe from these two characters that emerge. And their names are Zelmore, who's Ethel's aunt, and Swanee. This also kind of goes through the typical Fargo intro this time.
Yeah, for sure. I'm very happy to see that. And yeah, we should have mentioned that in 401 as well. Yeah, just having that element of the show is it's really important. Like that's what the show, that's what all 4 seasons are about. It's about truth and lies. And so the beginning by saying this is a true story is extremely important to the narrative and to the experience of watching Fargo. Just right off the bat, yeah, as soon as, because that, you're right, it's a weird opening for 402, and it does look odd, that prison, and pans down and you see something trying to get out of the sewer, and you know it's people, but you don't know exactly who. I at least I couldn't tell. Maybe my screen was just too dark. But then they get out, and at that moment I'm like, oh, here we go. We got our duo for season 4. And here's my prediction. This is going to be my favorite duo. That's my big, bold prediction. This is going to be my favorite duo in any of the seasons. I already love these two. I love them so much. Their little quirks are remarkable. But when they break out, they're just so happy to be out, and you know that they're tied to the narrative in some way, and they're going to probably become big players. In season 1, we have Wrench and Numbers, and in season 2, we have the Kitchen Brothers, and then in season 3, we have Yuri and Mimo. And now we've got these two, and I'm so excited about it.
They look like they're going to be a lot of fun this season. And again, similar to Jesse Buckley, these actors have a great opportunity with just some quirky Fargo characters. They go into a bar, they steal people's clothes, and then they meet up with Ethel, and I thought that was a nice reveal. I was like, the whole time I was like, how do these people tie into the story? It was like a beautiful. We play a game occasionally called Fiasco, which is based off Coen Brothers films, and it definitely felt like you're going around the table, and it's like, oh, these people are just doing something completely different.
Yeah, and then you hope it ties in at some point, and you just got to make a note of it. Like, okay, I've got to be the one to figure out how we're gonna bring these two worlds together. But yeah, it comes in pretty quickly. They don't wait until the end of the episode to reveal who these people are. They jump into the story pretty fast.
Any thoughts on Zelmar and Swanee? Or
just that I love them, and I hope that they make it throughout the whole season. I mean, in the bar scene, or when they get to the bar and they steal the people's clothes, again, it's similar with the father that I mentioned in 401. It's just these small little quirks. There's not a lot to go on yet with their characters, but and one of the reasons that I feel like those two and then the father as well might just get some more stuff to play with down the line is because I feel like Hawley had a pretty good idea. Like, okay, this is a character that's worth doing some interesting stuff with, and like as actors. But yeah, just I can't even describe the peculiarities of these two. They're just you got to watch them. That's it. Again, they pop off the screen, and when they get to the house, also I think there's we mentioned in 401, there's a real love in that family when they show up, and then Ethel's like upstairs and peeking in, and then it's like, get down here, give your auntie a hug, and there's like real love there. It's a loving family all around, even though there's a little bit of tension between the mom and the sister.
And it's just interesting to see that the father is so open to just having them stay when clearly they were in prison.
Right, yeah. He sort of does, whether he's from, you mentioned he might have a little bit of an accent of some sort, whether he is, that Midwestern or, Minnesota kind of a guy, he definitely has that mild-mannered Midwestern attitude for sure. It's just like, even if these people were in prison for murder, we got to invite them in for a cup of coffee. It's just polite to do that,
Right. And again, kind of earlier on, we kind of skipped over this, but I think this is a good time to talk about it. He is very kind to Nurse Mayflower when she's kind of talking to Ethel in kind of a rude way, talking about how she's so well educated for someone of her complexion and things like that.
Yeah, and saying things like, your mother must be very dark-skinned, because in my professional life, I've noticed that the darkest of the skins, becomes the prevailing skin color for the child. Just weird racial things like that, which also make that ending of 401 even more sinister and kind of frightening, because there's that racialized aspect to it. And you don't know where she's coming from. There's this, she's a racist, and she's super religious, and she's murdering people in the hospital, and now she has this odd, weird affection for her African-American neighbors. It's alarming for sure.
I realized it also kind of calls back in a lot of ways to Ted Danson and Bokeem Woodbine's scene on the highway, where like Bokeem Woodbine's like, you guys are all so nice out here, and he's like, but like underneath it all, like I can see that like there's like disdain, and there's like hinting at like racism and like a lot of like just like tempered down emotions. And I definitely think we're getting this with Orietta Mayflower, which is super exciting this season.
That's a really good point. She definitely could be that very well could be what the character is intended to be, is sort of like what happens when you get a Fargo character who is so Fargo that they, like, to their core, they're embodying the worst aspects of these people, like you said, keeping those emotions really tight, the sort of religious and a little bit racist, and just like what could go wrong with like a Midwestern white person, in the worst kind of way.
Or she's possessed by the devil.
I'm not going to rule it out. I think maybe whether she's possessed by the devil or not, she's definitely got some devil in her.
We're on Devil Watch here on on This Is a True podcast. All right, let's keep going in this episode. So the next scene, again, a beautiful shot of just a bunch of cigarettes on the floor, and there is a hospital drive-by, and they shoot up Harvard. The Italians shoot up Harvard, who did not let them in, most likely the prior day, maybe the prior week.
Yeah, not much to say on that. Just that, they took that slight very seriously, and it definitely shows you that these guys are not gonna accept anything less than politeness and complete and total respect. And so you get the sense that if Loy Cannon makes a wrong move, he's probably going to be on the other end of a situation like this as well. It's a dangerous group.
Right, and again, another classic mafia type deal going on there with a drive-by. And then we go to Donatello's funeral, which is why I think it's like a few days after, or a week or so. And again, a lot of the characters are there. Ethel like gets in. This is kind of an interesting thing. She kind of has like a password with I'm not sure if he's in his 20s or maybe like younger, but with this young man who lets her in through the back. There's tensions with the, Fadas and the Cannons, but even more so, like, I think this is a reoccurring thing we see in general in Italian history. Like, they were very much berated, similar to black people, but they also berated black people. And the boy says it to Ethel at the beginning. It's like, yeah, they don't like colored people around here, and they like have a funeral right now. So, just kind of a little interesting detail I saw there. And then most weirdly, Mayflower also comes to the funeral.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. That, and I guess that's. I think that there's definitely more to this than meets the eye initially. Like, whether or not, like you mentioned, maybe they kind of know each other a little bit, but also maybe she's just taking it upon herself to involve herself now into the lives of these people after what she did, and now she's gonna be intertwined into the story because of that. She gets another weird scene with Ethel. That's also something that we get out of that, and she's surprised to learn that Ethel speaks French. And another moment where we're just like, oh yeah, Ethel is a genius, and probably because of the way that history has gone, is probably going to be far overlooked as an individual, despite all of her genius.
Right. And something we didn't really touch on in the montage in the first episode, but she gets pretty heavily beat by the administration at her high school, which, again, to the extent that like it hurts for her to sit in the first scene, again, which is just terrible. And I hope Ethel's that kind of character that has a happy ending.
Yeah.
But again, Fargo, you get Peggy and Ed, you get Lester some seasons, but again, I think she's more in the good category for sure. But again, we'll see. Who knows the choices she'll make throughout the season. And then this goes on to Jason Schwartzman and the introduction of Gaetano, which is his older brother who got on the boat from Italy to come to Donatello's funeral. And again, there's a lot of tension there. And again, I think he definitely calls back to Robert De Niro's appearance in The Godfather Part 2 in many ways. He has like the slick mustache. Again, he speaks mostly Italian only, and like he's just new to America. I like the character a lot, and it gives more tension to the Fada family, which is cool.
Yeah, this is an X Factor character for sure. This is a guy who's dangerous and very concerning, and somebody that could take the story in a completely different direction based on just a snap judgment. He's definitely he comes in with this crazy monologue about how God, do I have the line? At some point he says basically like, murder is our business. Like, and just like that they were willing to switch sides on anybody at any point based on what would be best for business. And Schwartzman's completely unamused. He's like, okay, cool, brother, thanks. But he comes in, yeah, and you can tell he's gonna be a big character this season. And he's set up as like the big guy, like literally a big guy, like the muscle guy, the heavy. And I'm very excited to see where he goes. We'll definitely talk about that in predictions at the end of this, at the end of 402.
He's a Yuri Gurka type character. I
That's
feel.
a good point also, because it's definitely started to notice in season 3 that there were certain repetitions that were happening among all sorts of different characters in terms of like the deliveries of monologues, particularly. Like in season 1, you watch it and you're like, okay, Billy Bob Thornton gives a lot of monologues because he's that's who his character is. And then season 2, it's like, okay, Mike Milligan gives a lot of monologues. And then season 3, it's like Yuri Gurka monologues a lot, and VM Varga monologues. Oh, this is just everybody monologues a lot. But
well, season 3, everyone tells a story.
Yeah, for sure, that's true. But then also now, Gaetano comes in and he gives this big monologue, and it feels very much, that's one of those Fargo-isms. A character comes in and gives a monologue where they don't explain like, I'm this guy, but you get the idea of who this guy is because of the content of what they're saying, and the content of what they're saying is usually very scary and very not cool, not happy, not positive. It's usually about murder or about how we're all apes or something like that. And he's a guy that you got to watch out for. Definitely another guy that jumps off of the screen.
The next scene I have hospital. Do you have any more notes on that? I can't quite remember that.
I think that's the introduction to the cop with the obsessive compulsive disorder.
Jack Houston.
I thought he was. I mean, I thought he was wonderful. I thought he was pretty impressive.
Definitely. And again, it's that motif again. He's counting, and he's talking about Indians, Native Americans type thing. So just kind of an interesting motif to have throughout your series. And again, I can definitely see like in the future Noah Hawley doing like a full season on like Native Americans and like the plight of them, and like how honestly just how like pretty messed up their whole existence has been since European colonists came.
Yeah, for sure. And also in this scene, it's the moment where you're like, oh, here we go. We got a cop.
Yeah.
We got a detective. And I was pretty excited actually, and because I was like, I want this guy to solve the case. Just by the nature of his obsessive compulsive disorder and his tics and everything, you're automatically just like, oh, you're kind of rooting for this guy a little bit, just because he's had to, he's got these ailments that he has to deal with every day. And before he leaves the room, he has to, knock on it and make this sort of clicking noise. And they tell him like, you could just, you could walk out the door. And it seems like a difficult life to have that disorder. And so right off the bat, I'm like, okay, here we go. This is going to be our guy. Unfortunately, that, turns out to not necessarily be the case later on. But say it with me. We'll get there later.
Finish your beer. And then the next scene is Loy going to the Fada's one of their houses, and again, this is kind of like, hey, check in with your kid. We'll like check in with each other, and it'll only be like for a minute, but then we'll like switch around again, and that's when Loy says that line I was talking about earlier when he says, like someone will respect you when they get down on your level.
Yeah.
Which is, again, sweet in some regards. But again, it's this interesting concept where it's like, is the goal to manipulate these young boys in some ways? Which again, like, I don't know if Noah Hawley's kind of commenting on like maybe, again, this might be like an overreach, but like something about like Hollywood manipulation of like young children and stuff, because again, in this universe right now, like these crime syndicates are essentially like the biggest heads of like Kansas City right now. Which again, I don't know if he's calling to that, but again, it's definitely like an interesting little situation going on there with young boys.
Yeah, there's definitely manipulation there. I mean, both sides are definitely trying to get into the heads of these boys just in case they need to use that chess piece at any point. It's just another card up the sleeve.
And
them.
it seemed like, just based off the history montage, it seems like the boys, like whichever boy switches sides, like that's the turning of the tide. Like,
yeah,
it's just kind of funny. But and then we get a little more with Rabbi Milligan and Satchel, who I believe is Mike Milligan, because he's hanging out with Rabbi Milligan, and he has the same color scheme as Mike Milligan.
Yeah. Let's talk about this now, because I think it's clearly Mike. Yeah, without question. I mean, he's one of very few predominant African American characters through the first 3 seasons. So, it would be a stretch to say, oh, well, he has to be related to the black characters in season 4, except for the fact that it's in Kansas City, and he has the same color scheme, and he's raised by someone whose name is Rabbi Milligan. So I think it's a pretty safe assumption to say that this is Mike Milligan for sure. Also, Milligan's whole Rabbi Milligan's thing is it's dog eat dog, and I feel like we're gonna learn a lot about Rabbi Milligan as the season goes on, and his life philosophy is probably going to be the life philosophy that Mike eventually develops and becomes accustomed to in season 2.
Yeah. And Mike is very well read, and like he monologues like the whole season. With there's even like he has like an Alice in Wonderland monologue, right, about like the Jabberwock and stuff. But again, it's gonna be interesting to see because again, Rabbi Milligan is such an interesting character so far. Again, he's had like 3 scenes that are like mainly him, but just like his backstory so far, as well as just the fact that he has so many cultures that he's like connected to and intertwined with. Like, it will be interesting to see. Again, when they reveal that it is Mike Milligan. Also, the ages line up. Like, he's probably like 6 to 10 in this season, and it's well, yeah, it's like 30.
Yeah, it's 1979
Yeah.
in season 2, right?
Yeah, 1950. So like again, like 30 or so years in the future. Again,
Yeah, that lines up
yeah,
totally.
I always thought Mike Milligan was like in his 30s, but he's definitely like 40s, like Bokeem Woodbine was at the time.
Right.
But yeah, I think someone as influential on season 2 as Mike Milligan definitely deserves some more backstory. And
Yeah, and particularly with Mike, my only complaint about Mike in season 2 was that we didn't really get a great sense of why he wanted to do all the things he wanted to do. Like, you understood I mean, like, what he is trying to accomplish, like in terms of like what he's literally trying to accomplish. He wants to be a king. He wants to conquer. He wants to take over. He likes doing the grunt work and stuff like that. But you don't really know why he's doing any of it and like what his total motivation therein is. And so hopefully this season we're going to learn about that, and hopefully like Rabbi Milligan is going to be the guy who says like, you need to be you need to be a hard worker. It's dog eat dog. Like, we're going to learn about religion and great works of fiction, and we're going to learn about the way that the world works. And that's why Mike Milligan in season 2 is so surprised by the corporate America sort of takeover at the end of the season. He's like, this is not how the world works. I learned differently.
yeah, and that scene, looking back on it too, is like, we both rewatched the series in the last month, and yeah, that Mike scene really hit me. Like at the end, like, and again, like I think Mike is a character you can definitely like read into more than like they actually show. Like, I think over anything else, like, Mike is a romantic. And I definitely think there has to be some like romantic aspects to his character this season that really like builds that idealized view of the world that Mike has in season 2. Like, the crime world, that is. Because again, which also, we can get to, I guess we're talking about Mike right now. I think Joe Bulo, right? It was Bulo or Bulio. His Brad Garrett from season 2.
Oh yeah, I forgot his name, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's why I'm kind of leaning towards the crime syndicates are gonna kind of merge or something. Because again, like, I just have a feeling like it's not gonna be the violent circle we saw at the beginning of the season, and there's gonna be some sort of even ground. And I definitely think like Joe Bulo shows that, as well as just like just how Mike and the Kansas City mob kind of feel in season 2. So it should be interesting, definitely. Okay, yeah, and then the next scene is Loy and Doc. It's more about some stuff about the credit card, but also they talk about lions and tigers in the jungle and on the plain. And I think the last line of that scene is just really cool, where he's like, like they talk about how like uh Geo like Jason Schwartzman's brother is like a lion in a cage, right? More or less, and it's like you like a lion in a cage like still like is fierce and stuff, but like a lion with its like head on the wall is just like smiling, it's like it's just hanging there, which again I think it's just kind of like hitting it on the nose too hard to be like there's gonna be like a war and like like everyone's gonna die and stuff. So again, I thought it was cool, and it also added a lot to Dr. Senator's character, which he's really fun in this episode especially.
Yeah, I love Dr. Senator. Like we mentioned, great name, but also just a character that you like to have, especially in Fargo, is that father figure character for one of your main characters. And he's definitely a father figure type character for Loy, somebody that he can turn to and just, seek counsel and advice on whatever they're going to be doing. And he's wise as hell, and he knows what's up. And that was a really funny line about like the lions versus the tigers. Like tigers live in the jungle, lions live in the Sahara.
Yeah.
And I, there's more in this episode on Dr. Senator, so I'll save some predictions for once we get to his last scene in this episode. But I'm gonna just, a little spoiler alert. I don't think things are gonna end well for Dr. Senator. Unfortunately, as much as I like him so far.
Yeah, because it's interesting. I feel like a reoccurring character definitely in Fargo, like you touched on, is the father figure type character, and in every season so far, the father figure-esque character has like survived, in some ways. Like I guess Sai was kind of fatherly in some regards. I just think that because like he was in the Lord Malvo intro, like he was grandfather. But anyways, besides that, you have Ted Danson and Lou from season 1, and again, it's like they're set up where it's like they're gonna die, but they don't. So again, we'll see where Dr. Senator goes, and then the next is at I guess it's like the after funeral kind of reception. And then you get a little more with Jason Schwartzman's character. He has a fiance, and again, I think this is my oh heck moment when he's talking with his wife's father, and his wife's father tells him to go fuck a state park. I just like laughed out loud at that line, and the guy delivering it was really good, as well. But again, it gives more of that mob family, just more to it, and also just a little more stakes too. Because I think in this scene also, his older brother is basically just like, you're a pussy. You're being a pussy right now, dude. Like, we just need to take what's ours.
Yeah, it's for me this was it wasn't one of my favorite scenes just because it was so on the nose. It's like, I'm running for mayor and I need the votes, and I was like, okay, whatever, like that's fine. The fiance stuff is really interesting though. It's weird. Their kiss was funny, and then at the end of that, I'm gonna go slow pump some babies into your daughter. It was that's been played a lot in the trailers, but it's a weird relationship that is definitely not a love relationship, and it's going to be fun to see how Schwartzman uses her to his advantage throughout the season, because I'm sure at any moment he would be willing to let her die tragically and horrifically.
And then this next scene, with Nurse Mayflower, she's caught by the doctors, which is actually pretty... I thought it was pretty surprising that like they kind of cut that storyline already. She's getting a 2-month severance package after she again like it's that thing where it's like they're Minnesotan and they're like nice, but like then she just starts going at this like guy who's like literally firing her, and then at the end she gets 2 months pay and a recommendation. Which again it's kind of scary.
Super scary. And yeah, you're right. It's odd that they cut that so short. And I mean, it just begs the question, like, okay, so like what is her role going to be in this season? Because at first it's like, oh, clearly she's going to be the nurse and she's helping with the father thing, and that's how she's going to be connected, and there's probably going to be more stuff going on at the hospital, but now that's cut short, so now she has to find a new avenue into the story, which is really exciting. It's just, that's what you want when you're writing stuff, is to just keep surprising yourself and to keep writing yourself into new directions. And so it was cool that storyline got cut short, because as soon as you start asking questions about it, it's like, oh, it's over.
Yeah.
Because I started thinking, like, oh, is she like the most prolific serial killer in America? Like, how many people has she killed? Is she gonna keep doing this? Is that her arc of the season?
Right.
Like, is she gonna keep killing people?
And I think,
but it's all over.
I think it really helps that it's like, like, we're not doing this nurse thing the whole time. She's more than just a nurse, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, she's the devil.
Yes, we're on Devil Watch here.
Devil watch.
But anyways, so then she goes home, and I thought this was just kind of a funny little quirk to her personality. She's totally into astrology.
Yeah, that's really on brand.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah. And again,
that seems right on.
she has another interesting scene with Ethel. I think similarly with Jason Schwartzman, like, I think Ethel and Orietta are going to have a lot of scenes together. Clearly, they're neighbors. And again, it was a fun French. They were speaking French a bit, and also we didn't touch on this in the original, but Orietta knows Spanish, seemingly French, and Italian.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also I want to say Dutch.
Yeah, I think it was Dutch.
Yeah.
I think you're right. Yeah, she's gonna be. I mean, she's an X Factor character.
Yeah.
I mean, she's definitely gonna move the plot in directions that we are not expecting, and they're setting that up by letting us know, like, she is a multifaceted individual with a bunch of different weird skills and quirks, and so I'm curious how they're gonna use that going forward, because it's not, you can't just use that as a throwaway line. I'm sure that she'll become more involved with Schwartzman and the Italians going forward and put that Italian to use.
Right. And I forget, but I'm pretty sure she said both her and Ethel were Sagittariuses.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's like, they're kind of like sisters, which is also an interesting little thing. I'm really excited to see where they go. I think the more I think I was like really happy with this premiere, but like, the more we've been discussing, the more I've just absolutely like realized I really love where this is going in this season.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's just form breaking and totally different from what we've gotten in the past, and I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of fans that are really upset with this episode, or these two episodes, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of like, Noah Hawley sucks now. Like,
Right.
I wish we didn't get a season 4.
Yeah, this ruined my childhood. And it's like, wait, what? It's like, yeah, I was 13 when it came out, and I'm 16. And it's like, oh, I guess, that kind of works out. The next scene, there was a small scene with a character named Leon, who's Happy's cousin.
Yeah.
And Doc. And again, I have a feeling Leon's gonna have a big role at some point in this season. He's gonna do something. Also, just interesting, they refer to him as Happy's cousin. It's just like another thing where it's like history. It's like this character's kind of based off his history right now, He's like getting to talk to Dr. Senator because of his history.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, he shows up and immediately wants more than what he has. Like, he wants to rise above his station. And so there's a lot of room for characters like that in Fargo. He's definitely an X Factor for me. He's definitely gonna show up. I mean, he's gonna rise through the ranks. I think there's no question about that. I don't think they're just gonna throw him away. He's gonna probably, he's probably gonna rise pretty quickly. He's probably gonna get some scenes with Chris Rock in the next couple of episodes, and then maybe he'll start working in a more hands-on, strategic sort of a status with Rock.
Right. And there's a nice, again, I feel like a lot of the transitional shots in Fargo, just in general, typically not with people, but with forests and stuff. But in this episode with people, like they really just like linger on things, like, and there's just such a cool shot of like Leon and like Dr. Senator they're just walking like into the slaughterhouse, and it's just great, and it gears you up. And then they go into the slaughterhouse, and there's like rats hanging up, and they stab a guy in the hand. And like, again, you know, you typically stab someone in the hand in a series or a movie, it's like they're gonna die immediately, but they like talk to this guy with the stab in his hand, and like they still have like the axe like in his hand or whatever they use. That was my another aw heck moment for me. I'm just like, oh, this is like funny. They're having like a mundane conversation while like his hand is literally like bleeding out.
Yeah, it's a great Fargo sort of a situation because they build it up and then it's somewhat anticlimactic, but it's anticlimactic in a way that's like really funny and mundane and totally Midwestern and polite. And yeah, they come in ready to go, and then that's pretty much the only thing that they do is this guy's hand. You know, everyone else they just like get out, like, and then they take over, and then one of them's like, "What's next?" And then he kicks his feet up and he starts reading the newspaper.
Yeah,
It's pretty great.
Great scene. And then next, Orietta cleaning, very, very 1950s house, and just a very 1950s vibe. She's playing a Jonah and the Whale song, which, again, another biblical reference. And she's preparing apple pie, like, you know, like Adam and Eve. Like, we're on Devil Watch.
We're on Devil Watch, everybody. This is the devil.
Yeah. Again, I think she's the Lauren Malvo type character of this season. And I definitely think she has the ability to reach. Again, I don't think VM Varga or I guess it would be Hansi in the other seasons were supposed to be at all similar to Lauren Malvo in the fact that he's just pure chaos. But Orietta feels like the closest to that right now. And again, we're only 1/5 into the season, but that's just my cup of tea.
Yeah, there's definitely a cross between Malvo and some of the elements of Kristen Dunst's character in season 2, Peggy, and just in the way that there is something not quite clicking up in the brain about who she is and what she's trying to be. There's just a sort of a weird disconnect there, and as season 2 goes along, she becomes a little bit more, or a little bit less and less sane until the very end, where she's really, you know, when things go sour, she's pretty much, you know, kind of gone. There's a real, I mean, we've talked about it already, but there's a real evilness to Orietta that's really freaking me out.
Yeah.
Like, I'm really scared, actually, when I'm watching. Like, this is scarier to me than watching The Walking Dead, because, like, zombies, okay, that's cool. But and I think really what it is that the racialized element. Like, it's just in the back of my head now, because, and that's not unintentional that her first scene is commenting on the race of Ethel. And that's just in the back of your head while all this other creepy stuff is happening, while she's murdering people, while she's baking pies, and the music is very sinister. All of it is very freaky, and I'm very concerned for the health and safety of that family.
Yeah, because it looks like she put something in the pie. Definitely.
Yeah, I couldn't get a read on what it was. I assumed it was like a poison or something. Yeah, so again, we just get Gaetano coming in, full-blown X Factor alert, just coming in hot. Really doing a lot with his eyes. Really big eyes, real intense, doesn't blink a lot. And then him and Dr. Senator, one thing I was surprised with was we got a lot more Dr. Senator than I thought we were going to get in this episode, which is nice because I thought he, in his time in episode 1, was was really nice. Really just a really good performer, just a good actor, somebody that I was not aware of very much at all. So I'm happy to see him getting, a really interesting part. But then we get this great scene with Gaetano and Dr. Senator, and again, it's just more of Gaetano basically being absolutely an insane person, and sitting in chairs and elbowing people, and basically the plan that's been hatched by Dr. Senator and by Loy is that we're just gonna lie and say that Pops had given us this territory, and they're gonna just have to deal with this. And that's kind of, in a lot of ways, that feels sort of like the inciting issue for, I mean, the death of the father is obviously the inciting issue, but like them taking that next step, the Cannons taking that next step, is kind of what's going to become a real problem, because Gaetano is not having it whatsoever.
But yeah, anything else on that scene?
Nah, just Gaetano's throwing 100 miles an hour, and he just, you mentioned he's sort of like Yuri in a lot of ways, and that's for sure true, because Yuri, in his first few episodes in season 3, he really comes out hot, and you just sets the tone immediately of who he is and what he's going to be capable of doing. And we're getting the same thing with Gaetano in this episode.
Right, yeah. I'm really excited to see where he goes. And then the last scene, kind of, it's a big scene. Something we haven't really touched on yet. It does a really nice, I think season 2 does this especially well. They split screen a lot, and typically I don't like split screens, but this season and season 2 have been it's so interesting to just, again, it's kind of like a meanwhile. It's like all of these families are having dinner, and it's like all about, their history, and like this, like coming together to eat, and then also just in general, like they're all like praying and stuff. And the one main character right now, because even at like Ethel's house, like they're all having dinner too. It's like Ethel's family, the Cannons and the Fadas, all like having dinner and like praying and stuff. And the one main character who's not at any of those places is Orietta, which is just really interesting.
It reminds me a lot of like The Shining, with like all of the stuff that Kubrick was, there was a bunch of like Native American imagery and iconography just in the background, and it just makes you go like, what? It's obviously intentional, but yeah, it's not clear yet as to why they're doing it, if it's going to be paid off in some capacity, but it's been throughout the series also. So I think it's just an acknowledgement of I mean, it's just an acknowledgement. I mean, there's so many, like, I watched The Music Man for the first time the other day. There's not a single black actor in that movie.
Yeah, dude, that I recently watched that movie in quarantine too, and it's so long, and like it
is. It's not the best, but I mean, my point just being that like there's not a single black guy in the entire community. And so there's no acknowledgement of any African American community. There's no acknowledgement of Native American, anybody. So it's just these sort of small acknowledgments, whether or not they're paid off in any capacity, they're at least acknowledgments that like there are people that exist,
Right. And it is interesting. And I definitely agree with you. And I can also see it being connected to some sort of like, it's just that thing you saw in this episode. It's like Harvard and the hospital hate the Italians. The Italians like use that, and they hate like black people, and then like so on and so on, and it kind of just goes down into like a sort of pyramid. But again, super super interesting to think, and again, definitely, I like your acknowledgement comments a lot. And then Orietta, this is the big thing, leaves the apple pie at the doorstep of Ethel's family's house and knocks on the door.
And yeah, and just the way that scene is built is really fun, because she walks across to drop off the apple pie, which may or may not be poisoned. And the shot sort of lingers on this car, and okay, somebody's watching. We don't know who it is that's watching, but we know somebody's watching. And then the pie is dropped off. Orietta goes back across the street, and then sort of 1-2 punch, we find out who's in the car, and then the father takes the pie inside the house. And also he kind of it's a small little moment, but he's kind of just gives like a whatever, I'll take this pie that's on the doorstep. But then so he takes the pie inside the house, and I mean, when he picks up the pie, you're thinking, uh-oh, homie's about to get it. Like, homie's about to bite the bullet. Like, this is unfortunate. And they're all having dinner, so it's not just going to Ethel. Like, everybody's going to have a slice of pie. And because Fargo is really unpredictable, there's a moment there where I'm thinking, it's totally possible that this whole family dies in episode 2. And that's what becomes like that's the episode 1 cliffhanger instead, but it's in episode 2, and that's why the cops have to get involved. Right. And it becomes like a whole thing. But no, then then we realize who's in the car, and it's Timothy Olyphant, who's playing the basically what I assume is going to be our cop character for the season, whose name is Dick Deffy Wickware.
Wow.
Cool.
Very Fargo.
Cool. Yeah. And so he and the other police officer, or the other cop who has the obsessive compulsive disorder, and like a whole slew of other people
50,000 other cops.
Yeah. 500 people come out of the bushes, and then they knock down the door, and that's the end of episode 402.
Yeah.
Very propulsive and really, really exciting ending. Sort of, that's sort of what you expect from episode 401. Mm-hmm. But instead, they give it to us in 402. Again, they're just sort of taking their time with everything.
Yeah. And definitely a shocking ending, because again, you see in the trailer, he always opens the door, like he kicks the door open, and you're like, okay, sweet. And then this episode just ends with him kicking the door open. You're like, all right, great. I'll see you next week then. Which, again, might be frustrating for some people, which is completely, that's all good. But also, he literally kicks... he kicks us into next episode. It's great.
Yeah, he kicks the story into a whole nother dimension, a whole nother gear.
Literally, he kicks the house into the credit dimension.
He comes in swinging, and it's definitely there. Every season there's sort of like star power parts where it's just like this guy is, or this whoever is going to come in and just be a total star, and that's gonna be Timothy Olyphant this season. He just comes in like, I'm Dick Deffy Wickware, and I'm gonna kick down this door, and I'm gonna just fire us into episode 3 next week.
Something beautiful about Fargo, it's like, is he gonna have like a Bruce Campbell role where he's in it for an episode but he makes a huge impact, or is he gonna be more like a Ted Danson, who's like a huge star, but definitely like over the entire season? But yeah, do you want to end it here, and then we'll do predictions, and then maybe an intro, and then that's it? Cool. Let's cut this off. Okay, so yeah, a couple really dense episodes. And again, the most discussion we're going to have in 1 week is definitely this week, just because there's so much to cover, which again is great, but also kind of mind-boggling. But again, we're our 5th way through this season, and let's just end this episode with some predictions and some things you kind of want to see this season, maybe connected to other seasons, or just maybe its own thing completely. I guess I'll start. We both did see the next on Fargo, I assume. And I think the thing I'm just going to open up with is Swanee is eating that apple pie.
Yeah.
Which makes me think that Swanee is not long for this world. I guess it also means that the cops are here to talk and not necessarily shoot, because it does seem like it's a little time after that. But again, I'm curious to see what happens with Swanee because, again, kind of a wild character and very much like when asked by Ethel, "What do you guys do?" and it's like we rob banks, and it's like okay, they're just out there, and that's great. And I definitely think they're gonna rob a bank this season. That's like just one prediction I have.
God, I hope that they get involved with Loy and they rob the bank that they went to. God, I hope that happens. That would be a delight. First of all, I take umbrage with the fact that you think Swanee is biting the bullet, because this is my favorite duo of all time. So they got to make it out. It would be very Fargo though for one of the members of a duo to die really early on. That happens a lot. That's happened every time.
Yeah, actually, yeah, most duos, surprisingly, in season 3, they made it the longest with episode 8.
But at some point, the duos get broken up at some point. But no, I think I think we still got some time with Swanee. I think there could be a little misdirect. Maybe the pie is not poisoned.
That's what I was thinking too, and it's like if they showed that in the trailer, it's like of course they wanted like us to be like, I saw this, and it's like
right,
yeah.
Sure, yeah. I think I mean, there's nothing really to go off of, so I think we could just play in wild territory here as to what the hell Timothy Olyphant and 500 men are doing at their door. Or I guess they. I mean, the only rational explanation is that they are aware that they are taking money, that family is taking money from Loy. What else could it be? What do you think?
It could also be Elmore and Swanee because they just recently escaped prison, or it could be a mix of both. I think, or they know that the pie is poisoned, and this is my craziest prediction yet. And the pie that Swanee is eating in next episode is a different pie.
Oh wow, that's a prediction. A little pie bait and switch, huh?
Yeah.
I love this. I love this theory. I think it's either two things. Timothy Olyphant's either showing up because they know that these two have just broken out of prison and they know the relationship there, and so they know where to go. So they show up there and they're like, okay, we caught you. But like you said, it doesn't seem like they're going to be firing, coming in, swinging, So it's very possible that they need to use them in some capacity.
Which, again, is another classic Fargo trope, more or less. Like, and just a trope in, like, some crime movies in general. Just, like, pairing off with criminals that aren't exactly horrible, but that can help you take down a bigger criminal.
Exactly. Yeah, so I think that's probably where they're going to go with this. They're probably aware of the loans that they're taking, the family's taking, and they're also aware that, like, these two escaped convicts are here. And so we're going to put all of this together. And it just happens to be at the same time that possibly a poison pie was delivered, which is also really great and just super Fargo. It's really tough, actually, to like do predictions for this one because at the end of the first episode of season 1, you know pretty much what's going to happen. It's like, okay, Lester's going to try to cover all of this up. And, Lorne Malvo is going to go do some super crazy stuff. And then there's some gray area here and there. But then in season 2's premiere, it's like, okay.
Peggy and Ed basically have to get rid of Rye's body.
Right, and then the Gerhardts are all going to come after them and so on and so forth. And then season 3 as well, it's like, oh, okay, they've got this VM Varga figure, and there's the brother rivalry. And so, I mean, all of that, the elements are pretty clear. It's like, okay, here's what's going to happen because the plotting is pretty clear. But with this season, I don't know because first of all the cards are not on the table yet. Timothy Olyphant just showed up, so we don't know what he wants. We don't know what he's there for. Even like Loy, basically nothing is too tightly defined right now to be able to make a really solid prediction. So in terms of the Olyphant situation, and again, his name is Dick Deffy Wickware.
We're not Dick Hunt.
Yeah.
For his motivation.
Yeah. So I think the safest bet is to say that because again the first episode's description was basically like there's these two warring families and then there's this family that's caught between a rock and a hard place. And so this is the rock and the hard place getting even tighter. And they're going to be in service of the police in some capacity, I
Right.
think.
Yeah, that makes sense. And again, yeah, like you were saying, like there's not too much to go off of this season, which is great, you know. And I kind of like again, Noah Hawley's like also a novelist, and this is the most similar to a novel so far. You know,
Yeah.
it's just kind of like I love novels. I have an English degree, like I love them to death, but at points like novels can be meandering, and like that's kind of the beauty of it. And I definitely think he's bringing that to his TV show, and like in a lot of ways, like I don't know. I think like we could say like this might happen or this might happen, but at the end of the day, anything can really happen this season, which is the beauty of it. No character right now is tied down to pretty much anything they've done in the first couple episodes. Like not even Orietta, who like has murdered people. It's just going to be interesting, I guess, in general, to see where all of these players are going to land by the end of the season. Especially Orietta, because she has ties to pretty much everyone except the canons, really. Orietta's definitely possessed by the devil. Um, Devil Watch, baby.
Devil
And
Watch.
then the warring families will come together at the end, and sort of like what the Kansas City mob was originally trying to do. They were trying to just like come in, take it without like any struggle or anything, and then as soon as like obviously there just has to be a basically, like for lack of a better term, there's gonna have to be a top and bottom between these two warring syndicates. So there's mythical things every season, or mystical whatever type things that are like kind of greater than God, you know? Like I mean, what season 1 was again Lord Malvo really, and like that wolf, but like also like the fish like hitting uh Oliver Platt's like son, and at that moment season 2 was clearly like the UFOs, and also like the universal language for a while that might have been connected to the UFOs, but then it wasn't. And then season 3 was the bowling alley, uh, which I think went the farthest, which makes me like, this is why I'm like predicting something like crazy as like that Orietta thing, just because I feel like they're gonna keep going crazier. But what do you think it's gonna be? Just like a prediction, if any.
You know, problems were solved or resolved, or things were worked out because of a mystical element. I think that this season, like I said, I think this is going to be a really bloody season, and I think it's going to be really kind of a bummer season. I think there's not going to be a lot of happy endings here because, like I mentioned, of the history of the African American experience in America. I think that if there's a mystical element, it sort of flies in the face of what I think they're trying to do by telling history of these two groups of people. So I think that there's not going to be a mystical element this season. I think it's going to try to stay sort of by the books, um, which, you know, I would love to see more mystical stuff. But I think for the subject matter of this season, I think it behooves them to not go into the mystical.
Totally, and I can appreciate that prediction. And yeah, Dan, it was great talking to you about Fargo. Um, we'll be doing this every week. Hopefully we won't stay up this late, but you know, who cares? At the end of the day, we're talking about a show we love. Definitely one of my top 3 shows of all time. And again, just really interested to see where this season goes.
Yeah, it's really exciting to have Fargo back. It's nice to be able to get on a Zoom call with you and just chat until 2 in the morning about these first 2 episodes, and I'm looking forward to doing that for the rest of the season.
Yeah. All right. This has been a this has been a true podcast. Thank you guys.